Hello everyone. Today I am going to show you what I'm going to do to prepare my flosses for this next pattern that I'm going to stitch. Um, so I live in an area where our local needlework store still mostly just carries DMC and Anchor, and those are perfectly functional, absolutely. But sometimes an overdyed floss can add some nuance to a piece. And so for this piece here, as you can see, there's some very big blocks of color involved, especially the grass and, this kind of the house and stuff like that. So I was thinking I could just stitch it in DMC and that would be easy for everyone. And I think the color palette that I've chosen would probably work for that. But for my own piece, I want to kind of make it look like it's in the middle of a forest and things are a little bit dappled with shadow. And just give it a little extra oomph. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. DMC is not so expensive that I don't feel like I can experiment. I'm willing to play and try to come up with something that is a little bit more what I want, because my access, like, I can't just walk down to a needlework store and look at walls of different overdyed flosses to pick the something that is going to work for my project. I just don't have that available. Ordering online is great if you already know which floss will work for you, but it's not easy to pick out something. It's kind of uncharted territory. Like, if you've never actually seen that floss in your hand, you don't know exactly what tone it is, and your monitor is not going to tell you that very easily. So this is why I overdye. I know it kind of is scary for a lot of people, but and yes, there is a little bit of an investment up front in terms of buying yourself the RIT dye, which if you get playing with multiple colors, that can be, it can be a little bit expensive to begin with. But for this project, I think I'm going to use 4 different RIT dyes in total. And what I do is, like, I get my RIT dye at Michael's, and basically every week they have a coupon for about 40% off at least. And so if I'm going to the store or going past the store sometimes, what I'll do is I'll just pop in and use that coupon to get myself, a $6 bottle of RIT dye for, $4 instead. Better yet, 50% off coupon, get it for $3 or whatever it costs. So that's how I've built up my stash of RIT dye over time. My Michael's store is right close to my grocery store, so I can pop in frequently. Well, I mean, I haven't done that for a year, but when times are normal, I can pop in pretty frequently and build up my stash that way. So, as I said, this is the project that I'm going to work with, and this is kind of what I have. So as you can see, I've kind of labeled the areas with the colors that I'm going to stitch with. I've got a nice dark green for the roof. This green is the tree here. This gray is going to be the pathway and kind of the border to this area here. 732 is this tree over here. 733 is this tree here. 734 is all this grass down here. This is this part of the house, and this is this part of the house. I don't know, that just kind of helped me visualize it when I was putting the palette together. And Of course, not all the colors are here, but I don't want to overdye all the colors. Some of them I just want them, in their pure tone. And I think they will be fantastic that way. So this blue, I'm having a little trouble with it because it is not the same blue as the 823 that I already had in my stash. I don't know if the color is going to... Oh yeah, you can see that there's a difference. You can see that quite a bit here. So the new version of 823 from, I don't know when this was bought. This new version has a lot more of a purple tone to it. And I was really happy with this tone here and really excited to use this one. So I could just stitch with this one, but that's not going to help you when you go out and buy this color. So this color is fine. It's just not what I wanted for this piece. You can leave it as you'd like, but it's just I personally wanted this one. So do whatever you feel good with. If you like the purplier tone, go for it. So to kind of color correct on this new skein, what I've been doing is kind of experimenting with a couple of RIT dyes. I first tried, so the basic formula for it is in a cup like this. It's just a little 8-ounce plastic cup. I put in about almost up to the top, like it's, I don't know, a finger or two from the top. I put in as hot tap water as I can get. I put in 1 drop of liquid dish detergent and a couple shakes of salt from the salt shaker, and I mixed that up. And when I was starting my experiment, I tried tan RIT dye first, and I put in 1 teaspoon. And I took a strand about this long, and I attached it to the side with just a little clip and dipped it in and let it sit there for 5 minutes and pulled it out, let it dry, and kind of compared it to my flosses here, the one I want and the one that I had, and kind of tried to decide if that was something that I wanted. Now the RIT dye, the tan dye didn't give me much change at all. So I knew that I had to go to something stronger. And so that's when I pulled out my dark brown RIT dye and my dark green RIT dye. And so this strand I dyed like that, same formula, almost a cup of hot water, a drop of dish soap, a few shakes of salt, and a teaspoon of brown. Same formula over here, except for instead of the brown, I did dark green. And so I let those both sit in the dye for 5 minutes, let them dry, and came up with, I'm not sure if this is going to come out on the, oh, maybe. So as you can see, the dark brown really picked up a dark brown kind of tone to it, and is actually quite lovely, but it's not what I wanted. So I'm not going to go with that one. However, the dark green it has a very blue base to it. And that was much, much, much closer to what I wanted. It came out, I don't know if you can tell in here, this is the one I want, and this is the strand coat or dipped in the dark green. And it is a little bit dark, but it's actually quite a nice tone. It took out that purple that I keep seeing in this. So I decided, okay, I'm definitely going to go with the dark green. But I don't want it to be end up quite as dark as this one strand did. So what I did was I took the mix that I had with the 1 teaspoon of dark green. I poured out half of it and then just filled it back up to, about a finger from the top with hot water, and I mixed it up. So that'll give me a ratio where instead of 1 teaspoon of dark green in here, it's about a half a teaspoon of dark green in here. And I know that is not maybe as precise as some of you would like it to be, but you can always start with the full teaspoon and then pour out half and then fill it back up with water, and then you should get something very close to what I end up with. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this out and I'm going to dip it into my dye. Give it a little stir. And I'm going to let that sit for 5 minutes. You can actually see there's quite a bit of blue tone in that green dye. So I'm going to let that sit for 5 minutes and I will be back. Okay, so my floss had its bath in dark green for about 5 minutes, and I pulled it out and gave it a good rinse under running water. Once I was done that, what I do is I will take my floss like this and hold it over my finger like this, and I'll pull very firmly down to pull out as much liquid as I possibly can over the sink. Just do that a couple times. And then I take it and I put it into an oven that's set to 275, and I just kind of drape it across the oven rack and let it sit for about 10 minutes, and that is usually enough to get it nice and dry for me. So I did that. Actually, this is the old floss, the old version, and this is the one that I just overdyed here. Now I didn't get exactly this tone. There's still a hint of purple to it, but it's much less than it was, and it's a little bit closer to what I was hoping for. So it there's a sharper contrast on the camera here, but when I'm looking at it dead on, it's not too bad of a difference actually, and I quite like the result. So I probably could have maybe gone with instead of half a teaspoon of dark green, maybe 3/4. That might have worked nicely. So, but I'm not going to change it. I'm pretty happy with this the way it is. So, and I've compared it to the rest of my flosses, the palette, and my fabric, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. So, I'm going to roll with it. Yay! Okay, so we need to deal with the other flosses. So, like I said, this is the whole palette, I think. I mean, when I'm designing, I'm not very good with color until I'm actually stitching with it. I haven't been stitching for long enough to know how different a strand is going to look on my fabric when it's actually being stitched. So I will have a tendency to change things up as I'm doing a test stitch, and that might be how it's going to be for a very long time. I don't know. So I just do what I can. You'll have to be patient with me. All right, so I'm going to get prepared to do the other bit of dyeing, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now we're ready to start tackling some of the other flosses. Before I got into this, I kind of came up with a little bit of a plan. I have a lot of light tones and a lot of darker tones, and they're going to kind of need different levels of overdye, but most of them are just going to get like a little bit of charcoal added to them because the effect that I want is kind of the dappling of shadows in a forest. So that is going to be most of it, but I also have sunshine orange here and a pack of Dylon black, because I have a bunch of different, I have light flosses and I have dark flosses. So they're all going to need to be treated a little bit differently here. And so we'll just get going, and hopefully you'll stick with me and find out what's going on. Okay, so this is the lightest of the floss, and it's the one that I want to have as the grass. So I decided, and I've done this before for a different project, that I want a couple different tones in the grass. I want to have it kind of with some orange layered on top to kind of give some rusty tones in certain spots. And I want some gray on top just to kind of give it some darker, grayer, obviously, kind of spots. So that's what I'm going to go with. You can always play around with different tones, and I kind of debated whether or not to use dark green instead on this, and I think that would also look lovely, but just for the sake of keeping my dye selection down a little bit today, keeping this all a little bit more simple, I decided to go with the orange and the gray on this floss. So this one is, what color is it? It is 734. And like I said, we're going to do some sunshine orange and some charcoal gray. And we're going to, the sunshine orange, I'm not sure what strength we're going to do that yet. We're going to do some testing to kind of figure out. But the charcoal gray, we're going to keep it kind of on the lighter end of things, I think, just because we don't want it to be too dark, I guess. So we'll figure it out. Okay, so I've already given these a really good shake. I'm going to shake them up a little bit more, just because they are, they can settle a little bit, and you want the pigments mixed in evenly, right? So otherwise they might sink to the bottom. So we'll give them another good shake. Okay. I also have, I poured a cup of hottest tap water. I put in a couple couple good shakes from the salt shaker of salt, and 1 drop of liquid soap. And I don't know that the liquid dish detergent is absolutely necessary, but I read it on, I think somewhere on the Rit Dye website, that it can help with absorption or something. I don't know. Anyways, you can do it or not. It's up to you. So I've got a cup of it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour about a 1/4 cup into a couple of empty plastic cups. All right, I'm going to do this over a plate or somewhere where the water won't matter if it dribbles. All right, I've got about a 1/4 cup in each of those. I'm going to do a little bit in a 1/3 cup. This is not going to be for dye. This is going to be to rinse my syringe in between the colors. Okay. So I'm going to start with the orange because it's the lighter of the colors. And I always do an approach where I start with a little bit, because you can always add more. I mean, if you get too much in and it's really not looking good, you're not using very much of your dye, so you can always toss it and start again, and that's usually not that big of a deal. But start with less and build and see what happens. Okay. So I'm going to put in a 1/4 teaspoon, or as much as, it doesn't usually fill the teaspoon fully, but it's on almost full 1/4 teaspoon with some up on the up on the handle, and I'm going to take that and kind of put it in my water and stir it around. That looks pretty bright. We're going to test it on it. Remember, it always dries lighter than it looks, so it doesn't hurt to have it a little bit darker, but always kind of test it first. Oh yeah, no, I think that's perfect. So that was approximately a 1/4 teaspoon right there. Okay, I'm going to get my charcoal ready too at the same time. I might as well. I'm going to start with the same amount, a 1/4 teaspoon here, and see what happens. This might be, could be too much. Ooh, there's a little dry flakes of dye. I should be careful. Okay. And again, it doesn't ever let me pull out a full teaspoon. Can you see? I guess this is almost a 3/4 of a 1/4 teaspoon, I guess. So I would try pouring it and filling it, but while I'm filming, that's not as easy. Okay, so we're going to start with that and see how it goes. This is not an exact science. If you don't like the kind of random chaos of doing something like this, this is not the activity for you. You need to go and buy some flosses at your store. Okay. So it will dry lighter than that. I think I'm going to bring it up to what I kind of perceive will be a full 1/4 teaspoon. So I'm just going to dip it in and kind of grab just a smidge more, about like that, and just kind of stir that in. It probably won't change a huge amount, but just a little bit extra. All right. Yeah, I think that's good. Worth a try anyways. Like I said, if all else fails, they're not that expensive. They're a little hard to get your hands on during COVID times, but if all else fails, I will just start fresh and go from there. Okay, so I'm going to start with the orange part first, and then move to the gray, just because this is lighter than this, and if there happens to be some cross contamination, it's not that bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill my syringe, and I just got this syringe at a drugstore kind of thing. I don't know what they're used for, but this one is a 10 milliliter syringe. And it's going to dribble. I'm going to have it dribble out at the end a little bit. So I've already got a dribble there. So the effect that I want is I want a lot of this beautiful green that's already here to be in this. So I'm just going to be kind of gentle. And I've unwound my skeins into kind of a longer loop. And I have two skeins here. And I've just kind of piled them in the center of my paper towel. The paper towel is to absorb the excess dye as it moves through the floss, and that way it doesn't sit in a big puddle, because the dye tends to kind of roll off a little bit. So you don't want it to just kind of sit in a big puddle of dye. You kind of want something underneath to absorb it a little bit. And so, yes, I've unwound my skeins a little bit, kind of spread out it a little bit so that I have a little bit of control over where the dye hits and how big of splotches I'm going to have. And it's kind of like you can see, it's kind of looks a little bit messy, and I don't want it to end up like, I want it to be random. I don't want it to be, when you stitch with it, to end up with the same pattern over and over and over again. So that's why I have done it like this. So I'm just going to start kind of dribbling it on in certain areas. And I know it takes a little bit of floss to do several stitches, so I'm just going to kind of coat, some areas a little bit with the orange. Just in random spots. And this is where having your floss kind of randomly spread out a little bit kind of helps, because your eye will tend to want to like space it, in specific ways. It's just, we like to get kind of order out of chaos. So sometimes we need a little help putting that chaos back in. Okay, I'm going to grab a little bit more dye. And I want to leave some spots for the charcoal. So I'm going to do one last little hit right here. So I can go over some of the orange spots with a little bit of charcoal, but I wouldn't be able to go over charcoal spots with orange. So, okay, so I think maybe I'll just add like little dribbles here and there. For like a little stitch or two spots. Okay, so it's always a good idea to flip over your floss and see if you need to hit the back side. And yeah, it looks, these are a little spread out on the back side, so I'm going to refill my syringe a bit and do a couple more spots back here. I'll try to kind of stick in areas where I already see the dye and just kind of give them a hit in the same area. And do a few more spots where it's just a couple dribbles. Okay, so I think that's good. I'm gonna get rid of that orange, and I'm kind of gonna dip it in and pull some clean water out and kind of give my syringe a rinse that way. So now I'm gonna dip into the charcoal, and I'm gonna do kind of the same thing. I'm gonna go a little bit lighter maybe with the charcoal because it's a heavier tone, right? So, and I'm gonna aim for spots that don't have much dye yet. Again, I still want some of that original color to come through. but I kind of want some changes. So I think that is probably okay. And I'm gonna flip it over. This looks very Halloween-y, but it's gonna dry lighter than it's showing here. So, like I said, if all else fails, pitch it or throw or set it to the side. It might work for a different project if it doesn't work for this one, but we can always try something else, or just continue to use the plain DMC as it is. That's perfectly fine too. Okay, I think that's kind of what I want from this. So I'm gonna go and give this a rinse and set it to dry, and we'll move on to the next. I better hustle my buns, I'm starting to lose my light. Okay, so next up I have got colors 3032 and 733. The 3032, this one, is the color I chose for the logs on my log cabin. I know it's maybe not a traditional log kind of cabin color, but that's what I'm going with. And like I said, I might change it up as I stitch, but this is what I have chosen for now. It looked nice with the other colors, so we'll roll with it, see what happens. This color here is one of the trees, and it is 733. I think I've already said that, but okay, so we're gonna kind of do a similar strength of charcoal that I used on the really light grass color. I already threw the leftover bit of that stuff out by mistake, but that's okay because I needed a bigger amount to work with because it's going to be the base dye bath for the rest of it. I'm just going to do a lower strength for these ones because they're lighter colors, and then I'm going to layer in more dye into the whatever's left over here to get to the next ones. So again, that is going to lack some precision for a lot of people, but this is kind of more of an art and less of a science. So you're just gonna have to maybe play with it a little bit. Hopefully if you're willing to experiment, you're willing to kind of play and test things out and just roll with what you end up with. So again, charcoal gray Rit dye. I have already shook it several times today, but I'm going to give it another quick shake. And so to get a similar strength in this, so this is nearly a full cup of water here, and I was using a quarter cup before. And in that quarter cup, I was using approximately a quarter teaspoon of dye. So I'm going to use a full teaspoon to get a similar strength as what I was already working with. And this time I'm going to pour it because I have a bigger spoon that I'm working with, and it should be easier to do this while it's on camera. Okay, so that looks like it's fairly full. I'm going to drop it in and give it a good stir. I don't want it to be this color and then black. I just want kind of darker parts, some grayer parts. So, and I think that's going to do it. Okay, good idea to put your cap on your dye bottle before you get messing around. Okay, so you'll notice I haven't spun out my DMC into longer strands here. It's just I basically pulled off the tags and kind of opened it up a little bit to put it onto my paper towel. And that's because here I don't need quite as much control, and I'm just going to kind of, use some dribbles on this one. It's not like the grass where I want kind of like longer, maybe stretches of the color. I'm gonna, the dribbling is going to end up with certain areas that have more and certain areas that have less, and it's going to be, a little bit random that way. It might all end up the same in the wash. I don't know. But this is what I'm doing. It's all an experiment. And you're along for the ride. The very, very long ride. Okay. So, oh yeah. So this will dry lighter. You just got to remember that it's going to dry lighter. And so I want a lot of that lovely original color in there, but I just wanted to add a few spots here and there. And always remember to flip it over and hit your backside, because as you can see, it doesn't always, it really depends on how much you're squirting on it. I'm just kind of doing dribbles. So, it doesn't always flow through the whole skein to get to the back. So you got to turn it over and give it hits of color here and there. Just little shadows. That's all I want. I think that looks great. Yeah. It's going to be lovely. Maybe one more there. Okay, and I'm going to do the exact same thing over here. I think that looks good. All right, just some gentle spotting. That's all I really want. I think that looks amazing. Okay, so I just threw the rest of the dye, and I didn't even use a whole syringe, I don't think, that time. Just a little bit. That's all I want on these ones, is just a little bit. Little hits. And so I am going to set that aside and move right on to the next bunch. I don't need to rinse my syringe this time because I'm using the exact same dye bath. I'm just going to level it up. So I need a couple more pieces of paper towel. Okay, so the next batch we're working on is 647, which is a gray for the path. I'm just gonna put the tags with the skeins so that I kind of remember which is which. So 647. Just gonna spread it out a little bit. And then we need 732. So this 647 that I have here, I have decided I want to do a hit of a slightly darker than what we're currently using gray, just in a couple spots, and then I'm going to keep it here for the next round and do another level darker and hit it in different spots with the level darker, just because it's for the path, like it's mostly for the path up to the house. And so when you look at like gravel, you see lots of, lights and darks, in gravel. So I just want to kind of give it some extra oomph. And that was my plan for that. Okay, and the tree color, the 732, I'm just going to hit it once with the charcoal. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to level this up just a smidge because these are still not overly dark. I want to do approximately half a teaspoon more of the charcoal dye into my dye bath. And so I'm going to attempt to pour it into my tiny little quarter teaspoon instead of going to get the half teaspoon because I didn't plan that out. So that's a quarter teaspoon, and I'm going to do one more. All right. My hands are so dry. It's been really cold here in Winnipeg in the last little bit, and every time it gets really cold, it gets really dry, and my hands just, ugh. Okay, so yeah, that's definitely darker than what we were using before, so I think that's good. We're going to leave it like that, and we're going to do just a few dribbles on this one, and kind of the same effect as what we did for the other ones on this one. So I'm going to fill my syringe. I'm going to start with the gray. I'm going to just kind of keep it to a dull roar. Okay, that's all I'm going to do on that one with this level of gray because I want to leave some room to hit it in a couple spots with the darker gray. This one I'm going to, you can see how different, like this is a lighter color, so it doesn't, it shows up a lot darker on there than it does on here, which is okay. All right, I'm liking that. I think it's good. Maybe just a little hit there. Okay. We're good there. And I'm going to move this one off to the side with its tag because that one I'm done with. We're still going to work with that one. But we're going to add in one of the darker greens. So this is still 647, and now we're going to do some dyeing on 730, which is also a tree, but it's a deeper green, so we're going to do a darker charcoal on it. And again, I'm just going to work with adding, I guess I really didn't need that much. I thought I was going to need a lot more, but I didn't need that full amount of dye, but that's what I'm working with, so. Okay, so I am going to do another half a teaspoon of charcoal in here. Try not to dye your table. Oh, which is exactly what I'm doing. Okay. Clean up. The things I do for you people. I think we're okay. If you just do spill it somewhere where you don't want it, make sure that you clean it up fast. And make sure you clean up everywhere that it might have got messy. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, just in case there's any little bit left, this is probably what I should have had before. So there we go. Welcome to my chaos. Okay, I don't think I've stirred that yet, so I'm gonna give it a really good stir. That's a little bit darker. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to fill my syringe and dribble it in a couple of the open spots that I see. I still want some of that gray to pop through. I don't want that much of this dark on here, but I want to kind of just put little hints of it. So that was like 5 or 6 drops, and that's all I'm going to add there. And I'm going to do the same on the front. Because I still want some of that original gray to pop through. Alright, I think that's good. We'll leave it alone. Okay, so now this green is, we're just going to find some spots and give it some good hits. Hope I have enough light that you guys can actually see what I'm doing here. It's hard to tell when you're filming if you've got it, but that looks fantastic to me. I'm going to leave those the way they're looking, and I'm going to squirt the rest of my dye back into the pot. Okay, so the last bit of dyeing that I'm going to do is I want to do my dark colors. Now these guys, they're not going to show a lot of change even with, you know, that strength of charcoal on them. So what I want to do is I'm going to add a little bit of black to my dye, and like not much of anything is going to show up on here unless I use like straight up black. So, you know, I might get a result on this, I might not. It might just kind of like, it might be very, 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 very subtle, but that's okay. Like I just want it to kind of look like a weathered side of the house a little bit. And so if I get something, I get something. If I don't, it's not the end of the world. Okay. So I don't have any liquid black RIT dye. I have the powdered Dylon black, velvet black. So this kind of works similar, but you have to make sure that you stir it up really, 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 really good. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put in a 1/4 teaspoon and work with that. It is easier to get it safely into your dye bath. So if you use liquid RIT dye for this, again, I would probably start with a 1/4 teaspoon and see if you like your tone. You know, do what I've been doing. Dribble a little bit onto your white paper towel and kind of decide if you like that tone. And if it needs more, put in more. This isn't fabric, so I don't have to worry quite as much about, and also my flosses are really dark, so I don't have to worry as much about the crystals not dissolving fully as you would if you were using the powdered dye for doing fabric. Sometimes if the pigments aren't dissolved fully, you'll get like little spots of pink or red or blue or whatever the, you know, combination. Sometimes it'll pop out for you. So, ooh, that's lovely. Oh, I might have to pull out some white floss and dip it in this. It's kind of got like this greenish, bluish black thing going on. It's lovely. Okay. I don't know that that is going to show up on that, but we'll throw some on, see what happens. And remember, it all dries lighter than what it shows when you're doing it, so just always keep that in mind. So this is, the dye is rolling off of this skein a lot more. It might be something to do with the dyeing process of this particular color. It might be a little bit more repellent maybe of, so what you can do, if you don't want your dye to roll off as much, you can pre-wet your flosses and it'll tend to travel through the floss a little bit more if it's pre-wet. So it'll travel out, your dye will travel out more, but it'll also absorb into where you're squirting it instead of rolling off, kind of thing. So it's up to you. It really depends on what you want to get out of this. See, that took a while to soak in. So I'm just going to keep little hits. Or it could be because I added the Dylon dye to this too. It might be just getting thicker. That is a possibility. Okay, I think that is good. I think that's what I want from that. Yeah. Okay, I guess I can leave that there. So I'm just going to refill my syringe for the blue. Yeah, I don't think that's going to show much of a difference, but we'll try. All right. I'm going to go give these a rinse and I'm going to let them dry and I will be back to show you the results. Hey, I'm back and I have dried floss for you to see. So after I rinse everything really well under running water, like I said before, I just pop it into an oven at 275 for about 10 minutes to give it a quick dry. You don't have to do that. It really depends on how quickly you want to be stitching with it. But if you do want it soon and you don't want to let it air dry, you can totally do that. And that's safe to do. I do that all the time. And no scorching. So this is the results. As you can see, the dye dries significantly lighter than what you saw when it was wet. It was really, really strong when it was wet, but it's a lot more subtle now, and I'm so happy with the way these things turned out. So this is the color of the grass, and as you can tell, you can see those nice little bits of orange in there and little hits of gray, and I think that's really going to add kind of a lively element to the grass. And it's just not like I said, it would probably look really nice just with that solid 734, but this is going to add something. It's going to be changing, and I don't have to change the floss to do that. And I think it's gonna work out really well. I'm really happy with it. This is the 3032 of the logs on the house, and as you can see, like it's quite subtle, but there's shadowing, and that's exactly what I was going for, and I'm very happy. Same thing with 733. If I was smart, I probably would have had a skein of just the regular colors just to hold beside so you could see the changes, but because they are kind of subtle, but I think it's coming across on camera. I hope it is. So this is 647 for the path, and this is the one that we did two different tones of the gray. So we have lighter gray areas and darker gray areas. And just as it layered on top of this particular tone, you can see like it has a completely different effect than it does on the greens. So this is 732, which is being used for a tree, and again, just really subtle and lovely. I'm so in heaven over this color. I could totally stitch with this one all the time. This is 730, and that one is also for a tree. Love it. And this was the green that we used some of the black on as well, because it was a darker tone, and that is really beautiful. Love that. And then, as I expected, you don't see much on the blue at all. But that's okay. Sometimes even subtle changes that your eye can't pick up here can come across in your stitching. That's why sometimes, you'll notice that different dye lot in your, like if you have, you're trying to pull floss from two different dye lots. Sometimes your eye will pick it up on your stitch piece where it will not pick it up when you're holding the whole skein together. So we'll see what happens. I really like the color the way it is. If it comes up with some subtle, very subtle dappling, that would be great. And if it doesn't, it's not that big of a deal. It's going to be fine. So that's what I have. Here are the other colors in the palette. Just kind of, there it is. I'm very happy. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey today. I hope you find it helpful. If you have any questions at all, don't be afraid to touch base with me. Send me a comment below, and if we can't do it, answer the question through a comment, I'm totally willing to take an email. You can also hunt me down through Instagram. I am Sarcy Girl on Instagram, SARCYGURL. All right, everyone, thank you very much for watching, and happy stitching.